Mavericks match up honestly on paper, I think better than Denver did, just in terms of having multiple options off that bench, having a pretty big lineup overall in that starting lineup. You got after Kyrie, I mean, you're looking at Luka after Luka and the rest of that lineup. I mean, we're talking about 6, 7, and on for the rest of that lineup. So big, long defenders, and definitely going to be a battle for Minnesota. So I'm just wondering how Cat's going to fare in this series. So he was in foul trouble in game 7 against the Nuggets. That allowed Nasri to come in, make his impact for the last few minutes of that game. Cat's going to have his hands full. So he's going against PJ Washington. PJ Washington has had a great playoff run so far. And then the double center duo for the Mavericks of Gafford and Lively. And we spoke about Lively's impact in their final game against the Thunder in that game 6. Bravo to him. Newly crowned all NBA or all rookie second team as of today.
Yeah.
Well deserved.
He was phenomenal.
Honestly, borderline first team. Like he was
Yes.
really, really good this year. Like such a great impact for the Mavericks. He could not have gone to a better team to utilize his talents. You have Luka there. You have Kyrie. They're going to draw attention. Lively's going to find himself in a short roll situation. He's going to have lob opportunities. He's going to have opportunities to, just protect the rim and just demonstrate his energy. And he did that on a great level against the Thunder. So now going into this series, it's going to be that battle versus Cat versus Gobert. I think for both sides, they're honestly going to have their hands full. So I'm really keeping an eye on Cat to see how he does. I think he's going to have a great series. And it's interesting because that game 7 before he got into foul trouble, I mean, he was at 23-12. Like he was really giving the Nuggets problems in a big way. So I think that's going to carry over into this series. I mean, all respect to Lively, PJ Washington, Gafford, like those guys are great. And they've been very impactful defensively for Dallas. And it's a big reason why they've turned their defense around from the first half of the season to the second half of the season. Totally different team. We talked about it in the regular season. They were more of like a top 5, top 10 defense after the trade, and that's huge for them. So I'm just kind of curious to see how the front court battle shakes out with, I presume, PJ trying to stick with Cat, Gafford trying to stick with Gobert, and, whether they put McDaniels on either Luka or Derrick Jones Jr., that's going to be really interesting to see. A lot of big bodies in this matchup, and I think it's going to be incredibly physical pretty much the entire way for those reasons. So that's just something that caught my eye. Like, is Cat going to be able to stay on the floor? Is he going to be able to, stay in the game, stay focused, even if things get physical? I think he will. I honestly think he will. Although this matchup is a little bit different from Denver. He doesn't have a all NBA first team big man to deal with, but those other guys, like we mentioned before, they're full of energy and activity. They're going to be on the boards. They're going to be looking to make an impact. So, for the Wolves, they got to stay disciplined, stay true to themselves. And I think based on what they dealt with in last series and what they displayed, I think they will, just in my opinion.
It's interesting. I actually think that this matchup is better for the Timberwolves to face than the Nuggets were, specifically because when you start looking at the way the Mavericks were able to kind of counter the Thunder towards the end of that series, because again, we did a pod after game 1, and after game 1, my biggest takeaway was if Luka looks the way he did in game 1, this series will be a wrap. Mm-hmm. Luckily for everyone, well, maybe not Thunder fans, but luckily for everybody else, Luka started looking better and better as the series went on, and that kind of changed things. It forced them, the Thunder, to get even more extreme with their coverages, where they just started going all out with like, okay, we're just going to basically shade half a guy towards Kyrie at all time. Basically try to cover the paint whenever Luka has the ball, and maybe send him a double too, to the point where they were just leaving the corners wide open. Like, hey, if PJ Washington or Derrick Jones is going to beat us, whatever, we'll tip our cap. And they did beat them.
They did.
I don't think the Timberwolves are going to have to do that, because I feel like their matchups one-on-one are better. And the biggest difference is the difference between Gobert right now and the difference between Chet. As the series went on, Chet started getting more tired, and the Mavericks started doing a great job of, hey, we have Gafford and Lively. We'll just keep subbing them in and out, and they're going to be more fresh than Chet is. And so we reach a point in game 7 where Lively, in the fourth quarter, takes over the game, offensive rebound after offensive rebound. He's just destroying Chet on the glass. Chet's feet basically stopped moving. Like, with a running back, they always tell you to turn your feet. Chet was
Hmm.
just kind of standing there standstill while Lively is just buzzing all around and grabbing up boards. There was a couple boards where they have two people crashing in to try to help Chet get a rebound, and Lively just goes over the top and palms it with one hand. Like
Hmm.
one of my biggest complaints actually about Lively over the course of the season was the fact that I didn't think him or Gafford are like natural rebounders per se. So the performance he had later in the series was phenomenal and a key reason they were able to win it in six. I think Gobert is, first of all, he's bigger right now. He's sturdier. He's stronger. But I also think he's probably better conditioned for a playoff run than Chet is. After all, this
Oh
was
yeah,
Chet's first playoff run. And
yeah.
Chet started looking a little bit gassed by the end of it. So did Jalen Williams. I think the Timberwolves roster is better equipped for a longer playoff series.
Hmm.
And I don't think they're going to be as extreme about the coverages where they're just leaving PJ Washington, Derrick Jones to be like
No, they don't
leading
need
scorers
to.
like this.
You got
So,
Ant, you got
yeah,
McDaniels, so they're going to
yeah,
have the one-on-one coverage to be able to hang around and not have to send doubles, not have to shade. They can really just, if they want to switch depending on the matchup or, something more conservative, so they don't have to sell out and leave people
yeah.
open.
Because part of the reason they were doubling was because if you tried, their problem was there is no way we can play this 2-on-2 and get an outcome that we want. Because if we're playing
Right.
their pick and roll 2-on-2 here, Luka's either going to beat our guy, and if we try to step up to Luka, he's just going to throw the lob over us. Gobert
Hmm.
is also kind of the best guy at the cat and mouse game. It's part of why he won
Yeah.
DPOY over Wemby. There is, with the Draymond kind of starting to level off with age, right now, I think there is no one better at playing that cat and mouse game and being great at denying the opposing center at getting easy paint touches and easy paint attempts than Rudy Gobert.
Hmm.
So that kind of gives them more of a counter of, hey, maybe we are the one team that has a chance to kind of play this 2-on-2 without having to shade off of the strong side corner as often as the Thunder were doing because they were just going fully extreme. So
Hmm.
I really do think after the Nuggets series, once you face Jokic and Murray, it, it might just get easier from there,
Honestly, yeah.
which is
And I mean,
weird to say, but
it's weird, but I think you're right. Like, and you look at how Gobert has fared so far. Like, he doesn't post the craziest box score numbers a lot, but you sent me a screenshot earlier today to where he has the highest plus minus in the playoffs, plus
yes,
111.
sir.
So plus minus isn't everything. We're not trying to say that just means he's like an MVP candidate or something. But I mean, his impact is undeniable. And you brought up the fact about his conditioning. He has been awesome, and he's not getting as worn down as those other guys you mentioned before. So with
Yeah,
Gobert, he continues to be just as active as he was earlier in the game, earlier in the series. He continues to move around. And yes, he is awesome at that cat and mouse. So it's like, hey, he can at least make some kind of an effort closer to the ball screen, but also not leave his man completely open behind him for that lob. So he's kind of like, you can kind of bait people in a sense so that you try to make that thing work. Like Luka might try to make a lob work to Lively or Gafford. And he's like, hey, listen, I know what you guys are trying to do. I am 7'1" with a 7 whatever wingspan and just kind of deter those looks. So for him, that's going to be, he's going to have a huge impact, I think. And I think also a big reason why he's fresh and Cat's fresh, having Nas Reed to come in and
yeah,
kind of, provide some relief for those guys is huge. Like when Cat had that fifth foul late in the fourth quarter of game 7 last night, Nas Reed came in and had a block on Jokic. He had a drive and a layup, a Euro step layup. He had an offensive rebound, which he got fouled on. Then he had another block on Jokic. Then he had a tip dunk, a one-handed dunk, which is pretty impressive. And then he had that assist to Ant in semi-transition for 3 in the right corner. That pretty much, like, I would say, iced the game for them.
yeah, it
So he
did.
just had that whole sequence to where, like, he's a two-way big. And that's not something – and then we talked about this before, but, like, Nas Reed has really improved his game on that end, defensive end of the floor. Being able to hold it with Jokic, like, I don't think anybody would have seen that coming last season or even early this season. Like, if you had told people he's going to go one-on-one with Jokic and hold his own, I mean, that's just incredible development for him. So that's such a luxury to where, like, having Cat in foul trouble is not a death sentence like it used to be. It doesn't put you in a crazy disadvantage in the front court, so he can maintain his impact there. That's huge. So Now looking on the other side of things, if we're talking about getting worn down, uh, Luka did have some issues with that earlier in that series, but as things went on, again, he looked better. I just wonder if he's going to be able to maintain uh, that impact, because with this team going against Ann and going against McDaniels and all these long defenders, he's going to have his work cut out for him. They're going to make him work. So for Luka, you look at his stats, it's like, okay, I mean, triple doubles, he's 9 point over 9 rebounds assists per game. He's always going to have that box score beauty to his game, but the efficiency has waned in these playoffs so far. Only 30% from three. He was 38% from three in the regular season, so his impact from three is definitely diminished. And I think that's going to once again call into action Kyrie Irving to assume a little bit more of that role. But what's interesting, though, is he hasn't really done that in these playoffs. He's actually had a less of a role than he had in the regular season. So he was at about 28% usage regular season, 23% in the playoffs. About 19 shots a game regular season, 16 shots per game in the playoffs. And I think part of that is because they're getting such a great contribution from those role players. So you look at what Derrick Jones has done in these playoffs, especially in that last round. Uh, he was fantastic, man. I feel like at this point, every three he puts up is going in. And he's shooting 37% from the playoffs. I'm pretty sure it's closer to 40% for that last series, if not higher. Like, he was just lights out on those catch and shoot looks. Luka was getting doubled, like you mentioned, by the Thunder, and the corners were open, the wings were open for threes. So Derrick Jones has been awesome. PJ Washington killed the Thunder in a few games in that last series with his shooting, with his ability to catch and drive off of closeouts. We talked about him in a former podcast around the time of that trade, and we talked about what he can do on that team, and he's lived up to the billing like incredibly well. I
I
love
did
what he's
not
done.
see this coming. I said some things about the Mavericks trades that clearly ended up being proven wrong. PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, maybe those are the guys you should be trying to trade for because they made a huge difference.
I
It's
mean,
crazy how different this rotation looks to the one last year that missed the playoffs. I was going to lead into this eventually, but now that we're here, I might as well say it. This is more evidence that a lot of times when you have these star duos, people focus so much attention on, well, the star duo is not working. Maybe we should split them up. Maybe we should trade them away. A lot of times it's not about the star duo. It's about everyone else around them. People were saying for years, oh, Tatum and Brown, I guess they can't work anymore. Yeah, well, you just run them with great depth, and all of a sudden they're the one seed. They're probably going to cruise through the East again.
yep.
They've made multiple finals and conference finals. I don't even know how many years in a row at this point. You have the same thing with the Mavs. They look like an 11 seed. Oh, but guess what happens? Now we had Gafford, we had Derrick Jones Jr. in free agency. We trade for PJ Washington. We draft Lively. Wow, this team looks completely different. Now we're back in the Western Conference Finals. It's
Yep.
amazing how different things can look when you surround your two stars with actually good supporting cast members to the point where the Thunder will try to just basically shade all the attention towards the rim runner and your two stars. But you have PJ Washington shoot 47% from three and Derrick Jones Jr. shoot 37% from three while being the main guy on Shea, which is an incredibly difficult assignment because Shea was the best player in that series.
Yep.
So you really need that supporting cast to step up. And that's what the Mavericks got. If it wasn't for them being that on fire from three, this series might not be where it is, but they did an excellent job at being decisive off the catch. Okay, I know they're leaving me open here in the corners. I'm just going to shoot. And they were just cashing in.
They knew what they wanted to do as soon as they caught the ball.
Yeah.
Matt Issa, he writes for a variety of outlets, SB Nation, Opta Analyst, just to name a couple. He posted an article basically summarizing the difference between really impactful role players in the playoffs and other role players that struggle in the playoffs. And the examples he used are Derrick Jones Jr. for the positive and Isaac Okoro for the negative. And he basically was talking about how Derrick Jones Jr. is shooting at a much higher clip than Isaac Okoro is, and he's having a higher impact defensively than Okoro with his length, using his athleticism to hang with some of those guys he's guarding. And then I think he also talked about how they're finishing with guys like that. I mean, if you're going to gathering closeouts, you have to be able to react off of that. And you can't just shoot every time. So for Derrick Jones, he's catching it. He's immediately getting at least in the mid range, if not all the way to the rim. He's finishing well. So he's kind of capitalizing off of those bent defenses that occur as a result of the doubles, the heavy rotations over to Luka, over to Kyrie. And that's a part of their game for him and PJ Washington. That's going to be huge in this upcoming series. They have to continue to be decisive players, not just settling for threes. But if you have a mismatch for PJ Washington, utilizing his size in the post on that opportunity. For Derrick Jones Jr., if somebody's off balance, being able to drive in the paint, make the right pass if necessary, finish yourself, make yourself available for lobs. So many opportunities for these guys. And that's why I think they're both having career years because they have these great gifts, but they're not as impactful unless you pair them with incredibly just high impact player like Luka or Kyrie to gather attention and just give those guys space to operate. Because when they have space, they are deadly. So that role player versus role player battle between these two teams, it's going to be huge because they both have 2 or 3 guys that can give you 10, 15, 20 points any given night. So that is really going to swing this series, I think, just looking at how the depth that both teams bring to the table.
Derrick Jones Jr. has never shot more threes per 100 possessions than he has this year with Dallas, to kind of further your point there. And again, this is why every time people say 3 and D, 3 and D, 3 and D, you can ascribe them to a lot of players of draft prospects. I'm going to be getting to it later. I'm going to be releasing more draft stuff eventually. Talked with Oliver too, by the way. Love that pod. With these prospects, there are levels of 3 and D. And when you have someone like Derrick Jones Jr. versus Isaac Okoro, the lack of passivity in terms of I feel confident and ready that even if I'm not a great 3-point shooter, I can still get it up with volume, and I have a relatively quick release versus Okoro, whose release might already be a little bit slower, and then you couple that with the fact that he's always thinking about, oh, should I slash or should I shoot? That kind of
Yeah.
couples itself and creates many problems. It's how someone like actually Jeff Green, if you look at it, if you look at Jeff Green in 2016, 2017, it looked like his career was about to wind down. And then that season, he signed with the Cavs and basically found his niche now as, okay, I am now a role player who shoots threes. He's not even a great defender at this point in his career, but he was so decisive as a 3-point shooter, and he's still Uncle Jeff. He's still got that finishing game, so he can still kind of play off of a great passer and kind of still finish off with dunks the way Derrick Jones Jr. does. So that kind of extended his career an extra 6-7 years to the point where we're looking at Uncle Jeff, and he's in year 17, and he's still getting a decent amount of minutes for the Houston Rockets. It's amazing what a difference it can make when you're able to develop your 3-point shooting, your confidence in your 3-point shooting. You become really good, even as a role player, at being able to read the moment, something that Grant Williams kind of struggled with versus PJ Washington, as we highlighted earlier in the season, where Grant's kind of like, I'm not great at attacking closeouts. I also don't know what moves to attack with. Whereas someone like PJ Washington, okay, if you close out too hard against me, PJ Washington has enough of a bag to kind of be able to attack that and generate offense for himself at the rim. It just makes such a difference, and it's why a team like the Cavs is sitting at home, and it's why a team like the Mavericks is now in the Final Four.
Exactly, man. All really great points. And for those reasons, this series is going to be fascinating because they match up so well with each other, and they have some things in common for sure. They both have a couple of high-level superstar talents, and they both have the depth to compensate. So can't wait to see how that one unfolds.